Yeah, it's pretty nice. My husband's been trying to steal it. He took it to school. I was like, where's my bag? So I got ready to work. Please
All right, I'm going to call the meeting to order. It's 7:07 p.m. on October 11th. Lania, if you can call the roll.
Yes. Kurt Johnson is absent. Ross Strigan. Here. Ken Hall is absent. Spurlock.
Here.
Moore.
Here.
Kearney.
Here.
Kim.
Here.
Meeting called to order at 7:07 p.m.
Okay. First up, we have public comment, and I do have a statement. The District 97 Board of Education recognizes that public participation is a vital part of our organization's success. During a board business meeting, community members are invited to speak during the designated public comment period on our agenda. The board welcomes participation but does not respond during the public comment portion of the agenda. Those who wish to speak are required to sign in on a public comment sheet prior to the start of the meeting. We ask that the following guidelines be followed in order to allow sufficient time for the board to conduct its business. 1, when your name is called by the board president, please step up to the podium and state your name for the record. 2, public comments shall be limited to 5 minutes. If multiple individuals wish to address the board on the same subject, the group is encouraged to appoint a spokesperson. Please note that the board president reserves the right to shorten the time for each person to address the board during public comment to conserve time and give the maximum number of people an opportunity to speak. 3, all speakers must conduct themselves with respect and civility towards others. Thank you in advance for your participation and cooperation. Lania, do you have the sign-in sheet?
I do.
Oh,
Yes. We have one person signed in. Jenna Levin Jacob. Please step up to the podium. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. For maximum efficiency, I'm going to read my comment, but my name is Jenna Levick Jacobson. I'm a Hatch parent. I am a volunteer with the local Moms Demand Action Group, and I'm the spokesperson for our group of four district members tonight. So first, I want to mention that Dr. Shah and members of the board are familiar with this effort to have the District 97 administration provide parents and caregivers with information about secure firearm storage. But given the scheduled discussion about the Intergovernmental Agreement, Memorandum of Understanding tonight, I think it's important that everyone knows that we have brought this up to all of those agencies. So village, police, this is an effort that we have addressed across the bodies involved in that collaboration. So why are we pushing so hard to share the message about the importance of secure gun storage? It's tragic, but the reality is that in the US, firearms are the leading cause of death for children. More than 1,800 children under the age of 18 die every year, are killed with guns every year. That's an average of 5 children every day. We're all right to be concerned about school shooters, the majority of whom, up to 80%, obtain their firearms from their home or the home of a friend or a relative. So securely storing firearms can prevent school shooters from having weapons to use in the first place. There are approximately 4.6 million children in the US living in a household with at least one unsecured firearm. The majority of children in gun-owning homes actually do know where the gun is stored, and more than a third report having handled their parents' guns, many of the parents are unaware of that. Nearly a quarter of parents did not know when their child had handled a gun in their own home. One study showed that 41% of adolescents in gun-owning households report having, quote, easy access to the guns in their home. And so public awareness is an essential component in making sure that secure gun storage laws work. Only 1 in 3 gun owners living in a state with a child access prevention law like we have in Illinois even know that their state requires secure storage of their firearms. I know that D97 prioritizes the emotional safety of our students, and with that, we need to confront the role of firearms in suicide. Nearly 700 children die by firearm suicide each year. Research shows that secure firearm storage is associated with a decreased risk in child firearm suicide. Additionally, 100 children are unintentionally shot and killed every year. So we have to do all that we can to prevent tragedies like these. reminding adults about secure firearm storage is one very simple but important thing we can do to build a culture of secure gun storage and safety in our community. I'm glad you're discussing threat assessment procedures tonight. Threat assessment and identification programs are one essential tool that allows schools to intervene before potential violent behavior can be committed. I hope that in your collaborative work, District 200, Police Department, Village Board, to fulfill your commitment to the physical and emotional safety of all students and staff, you also include a secure firearm notification policy, which is another essential tool to preventing gun violence. Since the mass shooting in my hometown of Highland Park on July 4th, many of my fellow volunteers around the North Shore have mobilized, and at least 4 superintendents have already sent letters to their school communities regarding safe storage, along with at least 3 police departments, villages using their communication channels to do the same. Recently, Winnetka School District 36 officially passed a safe, secure, and healthy schools resolution. Just yesterday, the McLean County School Board in Bloomington Normal passed a resolution requiring their district to provide information about secure firearm storage to parents and caregivers. When I first started emailing all of you about this, there were 200 students in the United States going to schools where there was a secure storage resolution. Today there's 3 million, so this is the direction we're all moving in. School districts can help prevent gun violence by issuing notices to families about the critical importance of secure firearm storage in keeping schools and students safe. Our school boards, our village government, and law enforcement should work together to develop and fund programs that increase awareness of the need to store firearms securely by distributing information to parents about the importance of secure storage. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
I know you were.
All right, then that brings us to the next part of the agenda, which is the D97 Joy.
Yes, this is the happy part of our agenda. So as the board knows, we have 3 priorities that we've organized ourselves around this year: be curious, be safe and healthy, and be a learning designer. And today we have, and as part of that, we want to elevate and celebrate our students and all the great examples of joyful learning that we have going on. So coming up to the front of the room here today is a team from Longfellow led by our student, Linnea, and her mother is here as well, Sonia, and Miss Rhea is here, and Principal Jefferson.
Wait, you want me to sit here?
We're gonna play.
Oh, sure. So Linnea has a plan, everyone. Thank you, Linnea. Great, well, welcome up, and we are just so pleased that you're here. And if, Ms. Rhea, if I can actually start with you, if you could give us a little bit of background, what's your understanding? Why are we here today?
Well, Linnea has made a beautiful work of art. This came from a project right at the beginning of the year, just introducing the kids to just some simple drawing techniques. And I think I drew on the chalkboard a circle for each student, right? And everybody had 2 eyes and 1 nose, and some of the kids were smiling, some of them were very serious. Remember when we did that?
Yeah.
And then you guys went back to your tables and you drew as many friends as you could, right? And then we changed little details to make them look like, remember how Lily had little cat ears?
Yeah.
Right? And then I read a book called I Don't Draw, I Color, which is talking about how colors can convey emotions in artwork. And then the students were tasked with just assigning like a color to each of the feelings and emotions on the faces. And the kids were all working, and Linnea came over and said, Miss Rhea, do you have any whiteout? And I saw her drawing for the first time in this state, because she had written WOMEM, so we needed to correct that second. And so maybe
Linnea, thank you, Ms. Rhea. And Linnea, so we can all see the picture, and I know that it's being passed around. We probably need to put that in something. It's a delicate piece of artwork there. When we look at this picture, what can you tell us about the picture that's there?
Well, when I was making this piece of artwork, I remembered that women have feelings, and like not just men. and the women are important. And I remembered how in the past men didn't trust women.
You had something, you knew you had something to say, and you wanted to, and you were able to say it through your artwork.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when we, I wonder, Ms. Jefferson, as you think about the arts in your school, what are some of your thoughts or observations in terms of the role of arts in your leadership at your school?
I think, for one, it's clear that Linnea is ahead of her time in some of her thoughts and how her thoughts are, orchestrated in some of the drawings that she's done. Ms. Ray has done a wonderful job of making sure that art has a space for artistic expression and that students are able to really express themselves and dig a little deeper past just surface drawings. And so this was really profound in so many ways, which is why we were thrilled to support her and just making sure that all kids continue to have the ability to express themselves in this way and be supported by that.
Thank you. And Mom, tell us what's going to happen next?
Well, Ms. Raya called me on a Saturday morning and said, "Did you see my Facebook message to you?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm at gymnastics for Linnea, so let me look." And I was like, "Oh, this is her artwork. Oh my goodness." And she said, "Well, I had posted it in a nationwide."
It's like an elementary art teachers group. It's an amazing resource, actually.
And she said, "People are asking for t-shirts, a lot of them." And I was like, how many? She's like, "Well, we're at like 700 now." And I was like, okay, I can't screen print 700 t-shirts myself, but perhaps we know someone who may be able to. And she reached out to Megan Lee, who has done projects for Lively and another parent locally to do like small batch, but comparatively small for what we could do. And she loved Linnea's artwork so much. She, this is a busy time with holidays creeping up, but she agreed to fit in a collaboration. And so we want to donate a portion of all the sales to, who are we donating to again? Sarah's Inn. And because there were a few choices we were toying around with, but we really wanted the biggest impact for the most women, family-oriented organization that's as local as possible, and that it was just like, oh, Sarah's Inn, overlapping. Because we've done Animal Care League before, we've done a bunch of other fundraisers personally, so it was like Sarah's Inn just fit all of those overlapping, so we're pretty proud to.
And I think the message just really resonated during this time in our world.
Yeah, it's been a hard summer. That's why I think we've had a lot of home conversations this past summer about a lot of heavy issues, and that coming through in this very clear way was really cool to see her channel some of that. So
I think the other thing as we're listening to you is it's the partnership between the home and the school, and how do we do what's exemplified here, which is to be partners with each other to support and uplift our young people and each other. We're all working through things, and I think, Linnea, what you've done here is you have also created a way for all of us to come together and remember how important the arts are and how important it is to express ourselves in a positive way. So I hope you know how proud we are of you. How does it make you feel that 700 people wanted your picture on a t-shirt? What does that mean? What did you think when you heard that?
Start with.
I know that's when you get into that my artwork was being loved, and that people liked my artwork and wanted to get t-shirts with it on them, and I was feeling proud of myself.
We want you to feel proud of you. We are proud of you. And we want every student to feel like you feel. And we thank you for being a leader and coming up here so bravely to speak about your experience. So thank you, and thank you to all. Here's the artwork too. Thank you. Oh.
Thank you. Okay, lovely. Let's move on to the consent agenda. Someone can make a motion?
I move the Board of Education of Oak Park Elementary School District 97 approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Rosterman,
Yes.
Kurt Johnson is absent. Ken Hall is absent. Spurlock,
Yes.
Kim
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Kearney,
Yes.
motion passed.
Up next, we have the approval of the MOU with the OPTA. Holly and Nancy, as board members, have been on the negotiations team, and they are going to speak about that process, or
Sure.
the outcome.
So we are excited to be approving an MOU with OPTA for a 2-year extension of the 2018 to 2022 collective bargaining agreement. And so this 2-year extension will provide for, there's a lot of information that'll come out on the details of the contract. But most importantly is most of the terms stay the same, except for that there will be a increase from 1.5% CPI to 2% raise for all teachers. And then there's also a stipend for teachers for retention during COVID. Depending, and that stipend will vary depending on the number of years of service. There's also some other additions that are intended to make sure that, that some of the teachers, based on the structure of the contract, that everybody is getting an increase. And those things are important, and in 2 years, the extension will expire and we'll start to have a conversation about a 4-year contract. But I think what's really important is Nancy and I had the opportunity to spend 10 months with about 15 of our teachers. Miss Rayo is one of them, she already left. And spend time with the negotiating team and the OPTA leadership and the admin team, and reinforce kind of everyone's commitment to our students, but also really reflect on how hard the last few years with COVID has been. And rather than create kind of a 4-year new contract, we've got Dr. Shaw just starting, and we're coming off of like a collectively difficult time, that we were able to reach an agreement to do a 2-year extension and reconvene and revisit all of the reasons we are here sometime starting in the school year of 2023. And so personally, the opportunity to kind of get to know even a small group of teachers better is always an enjoyable thing. It's always kind of makes you realize just how why the magic happens in the classroom and how important our teachers are. And we did our best in this time to reach agreement to carry on and then be ready for next time.
Any questions or comments? I think, does everyone have, can someone read the motion?
I don't think there's a motion in here, but I move that we approve,
Sorry, I'm the only one.
okay. I move that the Board of Education of Oak Park Elementary School District 97 approve the MOU with OPTA for a 2-year extension of the 2018 to 2022 collective bargaining agreement.
Second.
Kim,
Yes.
Kearney,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Spurlock,
Yes.
Ken Hall is absent. Rosterman,
Yes.
Kurt Johnson is absent, motion passed.
Up next then, we have discussion of or a presentation on the intergovernmental agreement.
Yes, so at this time, I'd like to welcome my colleagues to the front of the room here. We have Superintendent Greg Johnson, as well as Village Manager Kevin Jackson. So come on up, and Chief Johnson, will you be coming up as well?
Yeah.
Come on up. Chief Johnson is here as well. Yeah, Linnea had a different high
Yeah,
chair.
exactly. I noticed that when I sat down.
All right, great. Well, thank you to my colleagues and guests for being here. The purpose of today's presentation, the title here is Evolving Our Partnership. And this is our tri-agency, that's the Village, District 97 and District 200. And our effort here to balance the community's calls for school safety on the one hand and racial equity on the other, and what that means to bring those two concepts together in a way that may not have existed in the past. And so what we are doing today is sharing about a proposed intergovernmental agreement, and we'll share at the end kind of a timeline of next steps. But our plan is to co-present this information at the other bodies as well. So we think it's important. We wanted to start with this statement that our understanding is that we are all charged to support the young people of our community, and it's with that spirit and that understanding that this work has been started. So the guiding values and beliefs here, I wanted to just take a moment. Let me just pause, and instead of reading them, I'd like to ask everyone to just take a couple minutes here to read them on your own. So as you scan kind of the concepts and the values that are here to pull out some specific concepts that really come to the surface, that physical and emotional safety, we are talking about that holistic understanding of our youth, creating situations that are both safe and supportive, really thinking about how we are sharing our strengths within the community to elevate our support of young people, creating new pathways to communicate and to collaborate, and to being really youth-centered, systemic, and anchored in racial justice as we do this work. That we are very conscious as we do this work about the racial inequities that are evident in our country around how discipline happens in schools and how the history around policing in our country. We are aware of those things and also affirming our partnership to come together to support young people.
So this slide here has not everything, of course, that's in the IGA, but it highlights the key provisions that are most prominent throughout the IGA. And I'm not going to, again, just like the last slide, read each of these things in great detail for you. I'm going to say 4 words here, right, or 4 concepts to think about these 4 bullets. We're talking about statutes and limitations on those statutes in the IGA. What are those things required of us by law? And what limitations are we putting in on those, are we recommending putting in based off of past practice, what we understood is best, on what those limitations, how those limitations are commonly implemented elsewhere. The statutes, limitations, the people in both agencies, in all 3 agencies who would be responsible for carrying those things out. And then, of course, specifically, the last one talks about threat assessment teams, specifically something that is referenced in state code that we need to make sure that we respond to appropriately in our campuses. So it's really statute, limitations, the people, and the threat assessment teams. Those are the key 4 components that are in this. And I want to highlight, because of the shared partnership that we have here, I just want to underscore something that we realized to be true from the very beginning, that we are talking about K-12 students here, right? The provisions that we see outlined on this slide are ones that are appropriate for both districts, regardless of any other differences that might exist, okay?
So as part of the partnership, we quickly agreed that we want to make sure that we're communicating clearly about what this IGA means and what our relationship means as partners in implementing this IGA. So we prepared this FAQ, which is contained in your materials and available to the public on the web. And, you know, I won't go through all of the questions that are there specifically, but just a few points. Again, it's really, you know, we're trying to ensure clarity on the purpose of the IGA as well as the provisions. And then we really want to make sure that there's clarity on what those provisions actually mean. What are the implications for our students? What are the implications for our police personnel? And again, we made a commitment in this partnership that we would apply a racial equity lens in the development of this IGA, and we certainly did that. We included the village's Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer in the analysis of putting this together. But I want to say that it's not just about development of the IGA, it's also about how we go about implementing this IGA as well. So this partnership, we envision affirming a relationship where we, you know, we're working together iteratively and making sure that we're implementing the principles of racial equity as we move forward. You know, should each of our jurisdictions actually support moving forward with it. We could go to the next slide. Here, what we're doing, this is a part of the communication in the FAQ, but what we're simply pointing out here, we just want to emphasize to everyone that's concerned about this IGA and the general public that this is not a return, this IGA does not include a return to officers in the schools on a regular basis, right? So we are not, there will not be a presence of officers in D97 schools at D200 on a regular basis. This is really about establishing, as the slide suggests, clear channels of communication between us as partners on a regular basis and making sure that we have effective procedures to allow for that, to enable that. And we acknowledge that while we will have these procedures to enable that we will actively work together to address the issues that may arise in the process.
So we also recognize this is going to be an ongoing community dialogue, and so we anticipate that there's going to be affirmations of some of what we've shared, as well as very critical questions, and we expect and welcome that. We know in a few minutes we'll ask and open for questions from the board. We've received some already, and we just wanted to share very upfront that if there are questions that we can engage with and answer around our process, the intention, we're happy, the principles that are guiding this work, we're happy to do that. However, other questions, what we've committed with each other is that we will record any questions, and then we're going to reconvene after we make all of these presentations, look at the questions we've received from different board members, and craft responses together, and then include them as our FAQ so they're very transparently shared. But we want to make sure that we're aligned in our responses and not just answering questions to answer them, but really having high levels of integrity around our process with that. So with that, we are, as I mentioned, going to the public board meetings for each of the three bodies. We also will be, have had a parent-teacher advisory committee around this topic. That is no longer functioning at this time through COVID. However, we are going to stand up that parent-teacher advisory committee to use as an ongoing process to inform how all of this takes shape. And then we also have our commitment to two-way communication, of course, for members of the community through Let's Talk and other ways and through the board to provide feedback and questions to us as well. And we're committed to that process. And then finally, here is a slide I mentioned that we kind of have a plan. We are here at the first row today at District 97's meeting.
Some of the slides aren't changing. Oh. I took a laptop and
Yes,
I'm like,
sorry, well, I'm changing the slides in my own world, but sorry, thank you, John. So that was the different ways that we are, the public board meetings, we're going to start the parent-teacher advisory committee to advise and then the two-way communication. And then this is the timeline, so we're at that first row. Next, on October 13th and then the 17th, we will be presenting the same presentation at the District 200 and the Village, and then we'll be back here. In between there, we will answer all of your questions that you've posed, and then be back here to bring it forward for a vote to each of the three bodies in the same order. So we'd like to thank you for the opportunity to serve, and we're really using this word evolve, and want to thank our colleague Jim Hackett, who serves in our district, for kind of introducing this idea that what needs to happen here is an evolution of our thinking in terms of how do we come together to elevate youth and to create safe schools that are also racially just. And so with that, we welcome your questions. Anything else?
Questions. John, do you have a particular order you want to go in?
no. So, yeah, I'm sure everybody has questions, so.
I saw my space, I was like.
Well, I will start. So I appreciated what you said about that this is a contract for K through 12, but I actually did not see any kind of distinction in how we treat a kindergartner or a senior. And it seems to me that there is a very big difference between elementary, middle, and high school, and would appreciate some information on how that's going to be clearly delineated. I mean, literally the exact same conduct by a 6-year-old versus a 17-year-old should probably be addressed in a different way. You mentioned that some of this is required by law. I'd be curious as to what part is required by law and where we are going above and beyond what is required and why. And if we have data to support the reason why we would go above and beyond what is required by law. There's a lot of, it seems like there's a lot of discretion left to, especially school officials. I don't know if there's as much left to police, but, and I'm curious about the training, how we get consistency across the schools, who's gonna be trained, who's supposed to report, and who's gonna make those decisions. And I'm taking what you said, Dr. Shaw, that you probably are gonna talk about these questions, but if I'm asking something that you know the answer to, I'm not trying to rush through them, I'm just, I don't know if there's any, I'm acknowledging that these might not be ones you guys have answers. So I'm curious about what happens with the information. It definitely talks about exchanging information, but what's the purpose? I'm troubled by the idea of keeping records, especially in our district, of kids under 13 at the police station for almost any reason. I think getting kids into the system and I'm just talking D97 now. I have opinions about the high school, but they can deal with that. But so I'm curious about what's happening with the information and what the expectation is on the police if they learn a student behaved a certain way, and what the expectations are on the school. Like what's gonna happen? Like, is there an action? Are we just exchanging? And if we're exchanging, as I'm a lawyer, so like the idea of keeping records that could later be subpoenaed or used against a kid later in life, or to, I don't know, ascribe a pattern that doesn't really exist because of the way it's kept. And further on that, like, how is it kept? I mean, is there a complaint form? Who fills it out? Do the parents sign off on it? How are we deciding the language that we're going to use? And I'm concerned that without good training and without concern for intentionality around that language, it can be misunderstood if it is referred to later in a kid's life. What data is going to be kept about this reporting and exchanges as far as demographics, and so that we can stick to our assertion that this is going to be based in racial justice and ensure there's not disproportionality? Will it be reported to the boards? Will it be reported to the communities? How frequently? There's a memo, there's a note in the memo that this is supposed to, the agreement is supposed to disrupt the school to prison pipeline, but I'm not sure how, and I'm curious about how specifically this agreement does that and what kind of that is related to and referring to. Have you guys consulted, and this one might be one you guys can answer, juvenile justice experts, civil rights experts, maybe disability rights experts about this? That's a question I feel like maybe can be answered. And if you haven't, I would ask that those sorts of experts be consulted about the IGA and kind of the impact. And then to two specific points in it. One, the section on interviewing kids with a school official and no parents. I can only speak for young kids. I mean, that's kind of I'm very troubled by the fact that that is something that we contemplate. I can imagine a kid, especially the young kids we work with, being in a room with a police officer and school official and no parent, and between their desire to please and be feeling intimidated, I'd be concerned about what value there is in that. And then my second specific comment is there's in the exhibit, it talks about reporting incidents with teachers, and I'd like more details on what the word report means. Is it a student interacted with a teacher in this way, or is it by name and age, and who is it reported to? And what if, like, who judges whether or not it's something that should be reported? It's in the exhibit, it's the first item in the exhibit.
Exhibit A.
I think it's exhibit A.
Thank you.
Should we just go around the table? Gavin, do you want to go next?
Sure. Thank you for coming tonight and presenting and for all the materials. I appreciate it. I also appreciate that we are trying to balance a variety of interests here, and I know that they sometimes cut in different directions. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that. I had a few questions. One is, I guess, a broader question, and maybe it touches on something that Holly said as well. I appreciate that some of this is driven by statute, as you said, Superintendent Johnson. I also appreciate there's a lot of discretion around how those statutes get implemented. And in particular, as I read the IGA, it seems like there's a lot of discretion, as there should be, I think, on the district's part about when the district decides that something warrants police involvement. Whether it's an interview, whether it's a search, whether it's suspected illegal activity. And I would imagine that if you were to ask people in the district when they think they should, when and how they should exercise that discretion in their opinion, you would probably get a variety of answers that strike different balances in terms of our desire to balance physical and emotional safety and racial equity, et cetera. And so I think one of the things that's important to me is to better understand how, if in whatever form this goes forward, what that implementation looks like. Because I think the agreement itself doesn't specify how we make those calls as a district. It just sort of talks about, well, if the officer's there for an interview, here's what we're going to do. Here's when an officer might perform a search. It doesn't sort of explain how do we get to the point that an officer is in our school potentially interviewing a kid or conducting a search, et cetera. So I would just appreciate better clarity around those things and what kind of guidance as a district we envision providing or requiring training, as Holly said, et cetera. The other thing I think that's related to that I would appreciate more clarity on is, I know from the FAQ and from the discussion tonight, we're not envisioning a return to school resource officers, but there is a lot in the agreement that assumes that there's an officer in our school. And if there is an officer in our school, then these are the sort of guidelines around that. So I would like to better understand how, I guess I'm just saying the same question in a different way maybe. How and when do we sort of expect those provisions to apply. And in looking at the IGA, in Part 2, sections Roman numeral 3 and 4, they speak to sort of like overlapping and in some instances like tandem investigations of issues. And I would appreciate a better understanding of when we might envision that happening, particularly with respect to kids that are in K through 8, as Holly mentioned.
Gavin, can you just, what was that part again that you were referencing?
Yeah, the sort of lettering and numbering I got a little lost in, but it's Part 2, sections Roman numeral 3 and Roman numeral 4. Student behavior and school discipline and joint law enforcement and school discipline investigations. I would echo Holly's request for just a better understanding of sort of what I'm not sure if this is modeled off other agreements or if it's something you all have just created from scratch, but I would appreciate a better sort of understanding of what it's grounded in generally. And then the last thing I'll say is I would, in whatever form this goes forward, I would love for us to think about and operationalize how we assess whether it's achieving its goals. Like, how do we know if we're effectively striking a balance between safety, equity, physical safety, and like what would a successful IGA look like? And I think obviously probably situated in a broader context of what achieving those things in the district looks like. But I think it would be great if we pass this a year from whenever we do to be able to come back and say, okay, here's what happened, here's this piece worked out great, this piece not quite what we envisioned, whatever, and let's talk about how we refine and improve it. Thank you.
So I'm going to go forward and say first, I love that everyone is here at the table. I love this group of people. I do think an IGA is a necessary and good thing to put together. I think we've seen, especially in recent major school security issues, that not having that clarity, that not having that team of people coming together and thinking as a team is hugely problematic. So I commend everyone at the table for actually coming together to put together the IGA. That said, everything, use refinement, I echo what Holly and what Gavin said. Your first point of we're really coming together, we first and foremost look at the physical and emotional safety of students and staff. We also have to look at the individual students and staff in this, and in this case, I feel like there's some gaps in balancing the overall safety of students and staff with looking at the individual student rights in this. There's some gaps that, it's not intentional in there, but I think there are places where, for example, as Holly mentioned, reporting. Who's reporting to what, when, where, why? What are the standards for that? I get deeply concerned in talking about having students talking with anyone without specifically having someone in the room who is there for that student. Like very specifically there to look after the rights of that student. I see that there are gaps within it that you don't necessarily want something that's so bound, but at the same point in time, right now reading through that, I could see different standards of what's getting reported school by school. And that concerns me, because if nothing, the whole point of this is to bring clarity to what we're doing. And I think this is still missing the mark a little bit on bringing that clarity for all the reasons that Holly and Gavin have just brought up. I think they hit almost everything else on my list, so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sherry.
Thank you, Nancy. I too want to thank you all for being here tonight. I know you probably are tired from a long day at work, so I appreciate you being here. Thank you all for all the things you said. You took like most of the things off my list. But I wanted to know how the Park District plays a role in this. With the new youth center coming up, I can imagine that there are going to be like spillovers, things that happen, start at school, may end at the center, or start at the center, end up at school the next day. And so how are we working with the Park District to talk about how they handle situations, how they're working in collaboration with the police department, and D97, if there are issues that occur. And I guess that might be applicable for high school as well. I would love to see some targeted outreach. Ushma, you already hit on the fact that there's some mixed feelings about the way we feel about police. I think Oak Park, we're privileged to not have some of the issues that other large cities have, but nonetheless, there are feelings. And I would love to see some targeted outreach to our Black and Brown communities about what this is not, so that people can feel rest assured if they're seeing police presence in our schools, if they are watching this today, to not say, oh, they're bringing the police back. Because it takes one person to put something on social media and it spirals out of control. So I think being proactive about meeting with Black and Brown families to say this is what this is and this is what we're committed to, this is what we hope to see. I'm also wondering how this impacts, we've had situations where adults are offenders. Last year we had something happen at one of the middle schools. So how do we handle that when an adult is involved in a school situation or students from another district? And then I just really quickly touching on the reporting, because I think you two covered it very well. But when I first started the board in April of 2019, we talked about not using students' names if a teacher reports it. And at the time, and I could be mistaken, I thought it was agreed upon that if an incident occurs in the classroom and a teacher reports it, that it would be Jane Doe did XYZ. Because what is the purpose if we're not doing
Reports it to the police or reports it? When you say reports it, I don't.
So the report that's taken from the teacher, they were using the student's name. And we talked about that was problematic if there is
In the building, or I guess I'm.
at the police for their purposes. So I just wanted to know, is that accurate? If a student hits a teacher and the teacher, they call the police, what happens with that information? Do you take that student's name? What happens after that? Because back then, it was a 5th grader, that student's name and information was recorded with the police department, and I asked the question, why? What are we doing with this? What I don't want to happen is someone does something in 5th grade, they go to the high school, maybe they get into another incident, and then they go back and say, back in 2022, you had an incident in 5th grade, we're noticing a pattern.
Okay. I'll just say thanks for coming, like everybody else. So most of I think a lot of the questions, so I'll ask the ones that are different. So I think for me, I kept thinking, I don't know enough about what D97 is doing to know what this is gonna look like. And so I kept wondering, what is the protocol for when we call the police? One of the things that we were concerned about with the SROs being in the school, especially with young children, is criminalizing kids right away. And so when we talk about the school to prison pipeline, one of the things is figuring out, so a kid when they're 5 saying they're gonna shoot someone, right, is very different from a 15-year-old, which is still, they're not always thinking either. And so, when we think about how we're defining what criminal activity is, how do we take it within context? What is the training that's happening within the buildings in terms of how people are, because the other thing is we don't want to undermine or underappreciate what kids are saying also just because they're young, because sometimes, young kids do horrible things too, unfortunately. And so that's one thing I kept thinking about, is what is the protocol? But I think to Gavin's point, there was even the section where I was reading where it was talking about searching students at school with the police searches. And I kept wondering, when would we have a police officer come and do a search and not a school official first, right? And so, again, what's the protocol for when we're bringing in the police versus dealing it within house? I think my concern, and I think one of the reasons we had voted as a board to remove the SROs was to move away from automatically criminalizing kids, so having more of that context and understanding of where kids are coming from and trying to understand what's going on. I think in kind of in the same vein, I was thinking about, you know, people have commented about the data exchanges. And so for me, I was wondering, like, you know, I think it's pretty clear people are concerned, like, what happens to kids' police record, like when the school passes on information to the police and kids have records on file. But then I was thinking about for D97, what's our responsibility if we're getting information that kids are caught up in, like, you know, juvenile justice or whatever's going on, what does that mean for us in the district? So are we increasing support services? Are we doing wraparound things? Or are we just saying like, okay, this kid, like we gotta watch this kid, right? Which is again, not what we wanna do. And so I appreciate kind of calling out the school to prison pipeline, but I don't kind of, I think echoing some other folks' points, I don't really see how we're disrupting it. In some ways, for certain kids who are really vulnerable, I think they're potentially getting caught up in multiple systems. Which isn't necessarily bad if that means they're getting additional support and services, but is problematic if all it is creating more paper trails and more ways in which they're getting caught up. And I don't think I saw enough pushback on, like, how are we preventing kids from getting further caught up in the cycle of some of this stuff? And maybe that you guys have talked about it and it's there, but I didn't see it in the paperwork. And so I think echoing lots of things a lot of us have heard on the board about parity or uniformity, for lack of a better word, across the district in terms of how things are executed, or within Oak Park, how things are executed, because there's a lot of social media, so if someone does something different, then someone else has got something to say. So we want to make sure that we're being equitable and fair about what's going on. And that's not to say everybody has to get the exact same treatment, because that's not what equity is. But I do wonder about how do we make sure that sometimes we are allowing too much personal judgment, which allows more bias, but also making sure we have room for that judgment when it's, you know, in the best interest of the kid and well thought through and all of that. This is a really small thing, but I was looking at the section on cannabis. I was like, how much weed are people bringing in? There's this like, I mean, not to joke about it, but like,
Do you want an answer to that question?
There's a lot of like marijuana gummies and lots of things that are not straight like weed in the community, and I can see kids bringing it into schools, whether knowingly or unknowingly, right? And what does that mean? And so like, you know, like in the code, I hope this is not too silly, but you know, in the code it talks about like specifically cannabis and specifically like a weight amount. And so I'm like, that translates into like how much in gummies. Again, it's like kind of a goofy thing, but if a kid brings in 2.5 grams of gummies, like are they gonna get criminally prosecuted? And it may be that they think they're the gummy vitamins. You know, we don't know, right? And so there's even this language around the intent to distribute. It's like, well, I'm gonna share my, I don't know. Whatever, but it just made me think about the number of people I know since we've had legalization that have access to this and that kids have access to and that they may bring into schools, and how does that get criminalized, especially as a state we're moving to decriminalize marijuana possession and looking at like, you know, vacating court records and things like that. And so I just think about like some of that language in there as well. Hopefully that didn't sound like everybody's talking about it.
Everyone is talking about. No, I do have one thing, I hate that term. I do have one follow-up on that. I know that the high school, typically you guys do in-school suspension if someone's caught vaping or something like that. And so I wonder, I know this is also happening at the middle school. What is the procedure for that? And then the one thing,
Vaping just like nicotine or vaping of any?
Both. I know a few incidents of students at the middle school with gummies and things like that. I think the one distinction I would like to have that I don't know if it happens at the high school is if they, you know, I want to see less out of school suspensions, but if they're in school suspension, like what is offered to them to understand like why they're doing it, how they got it, who's getting it, talking to the parents. From what I have heard at the high school, they're just babysitting in school suspension. I And I don't know if that like actually is addressing the problem. And I think that if you're starting in middle school, chances are you're gonna continue in high school. And then Chief Johnson has done a phenomenal job. I know she had a couple of organizations working with youth, particularly girls. So are there any plans to continue some of those programs, increase some of those programs to support the relationship between the police and our youth? Because I think especially now, there is definitely a feeling of we don't trust the police. So as we're talking about this, like we have to make sure that our students feel good about this. And so I'm wondering, I know like we have, we used to do like a basketball thing pre-COVID. So what other opportunities are there for you guys to interact in a way that's not, like I'm coming to your school to speak to you, but to engage with them on the community level?
If I may, I would love to answer that now. The police is under my leadership. Speaking personally, I'm passionate about youth success. So if given the opportunity, I can say wholeheartedly, the police would love to collaborate, to offer services outside of any type of criminal engagement, to provide mentorship and just community engagement. And I apologize for speaking out of term. I know we said we would answer those questions later, but I'm passionate about youth success. So if given the opportunity, absolutely, we will be here in any capacity. Thank you.
I have one other follow-up. I know you mentioned the Park District, but I guess just adding the library and the township to it also.
Yeah.
The township has the youth and intervention officer, which might be another resource. And I mean, maybe, I don't know, I'm not gonna mess with your IGA, but maybe the IGA even provides for like a decision tree, right? When do you call the youth and intervention folks at the township versus when engaging the police? I mean, maybe there's something to help our school officials and everybody be aligned with which direction which resource is necessary based on what behavior we're talking about.
That's a good point, because I know the library struggles with that, and they are reluctant to call the police, but then sometimes it's like you have to call the police because they don't know what else to do.
But I do appreciate they've also been using like they have like, social workers, and so I think basically what we're saying is that kids all around Oak Park should feel watched by everyone.
It takes a village.
Yeah, you get a mom out there will tell a kid what to do.
I mean, that's kind of what it is.
That should be the slogan of this, it takes a village.
We're all watching. No, I think there's a lot of like really great potential, and I love that people are discussing about like how to keep kids safe. And I think living in a town like Oak Park, that we're not going so out of the bounds in terms of like the things that we're expecting. And these are all just, there's a lot of discussions and changes in the general social atmosphere, and I appreciate bringing these things to the forefront and allowing for us to have conversations and coming together.
And one thing noticeably absent from our comments is kind of we trust the threat assessment part. Like I don't think anybody's questioning that if stuff goes really bad, like we want to all be at the same table supporting our kids. And I think there's just concerns for these areas that are a little bit more discretionary and how to kind of make sure that we're keeping an eye on consistency and equity. But I don't think anybody even commented. I mean, I think having someone on the threat team and like making sure that our schools are physically safe and, we're from outside, but like from outside folks, it's about the students and the inside of the students that we've raised concerns about.
So I realized I did have one more question with the advisory committees, or rather a comment more to make sure that you are reaching out or consider how you are getting parents for those committees, how you're reaching out to community members to make sure that there's a diverse representation on there.
Great point, Nancy.
Anything else? No.
No, thank you. We have a lot of notes, and fortunately it's recorded, so our plan is to be very deliberate about every question you have asked and every question that we're going to be asked at the next 2 meetings. I will just say that one of the themes that comes out to me as I think about and look at these questions is the call for systems building, for culture building, for unity across agencies, which is what we've started. You're saying, you're not saying why is everyone here together? You're saying who else might be here and how do we need to think about that? And I think that's a very powerful affirmation for us. So let us come back to you then after we make the next presentation. Anything else from colleagues here?
From my point of view, well said. I don't have anything else.
Okay.
No, we're working on in-school suspension, that's all here. So, no, but thank you, yeah. I appreciate the questions, and there are some very clear themes that come out of this. 4, 5, maybe 6 really clear themes that we can work on. So.
Kind of one of the things we talked about is like, it's great to, like, this should be a space where Oak Park leads and figures things out and speaks about what we're learning. And is a place where we can contribute, first of all, to our own community and to our own young people here, but also hopefully to a broader conversation in our country. And so we'll do that with integrity. So I'm really so grateful for my colleagues here. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Good job, man.
I say I love this table. This
I
is
do
really,
too.
it's so cool.
I do appreciate it too myself.
You know
Take
what,
care.
though? Thank you. Good to see you all. Thanks for coming out. Okay, here. Okay. Then that brings us to board assignments. Standing board committees, back for CCE claim.
Jeannie, do we have a date for FAC? No, I just emailed the remaining 3 people today. I know.
We're trying to meet with FAC next week.
That is pretty much the same update for claim, is that we, Dr. Shaw, myself, and Shaila all met with the leads of claim, so we can get set up for the year and get things moving.
Okay. IG, intergovernmental liaison, so IGA, PTOC, CEC, OPS, et cetera, et cetera.
PTOC meets next week.
Thank you. I think early childhood's meeting sometime.
I think it's, yeah, we have it in the calendar.
Somewhere on the calendar, I just can't remember.
Just the governing board.
Yeah,
not
the governing, not the tribe.
Although, I think, Wanya, you have the date, maybe you should let the board know the governing when they have to come. For, what's it, for the
tri.
collaboration.
Yeah, the collaboration, the tri-board meeting.
Yeah. Is it in December?
I'll share the date.
Yeah.
I don't have it.
Okay, thank you. Any other updates?
We have not, intergovernmental, we have not met, but we are working on a date for, I don't remember who the bodies were. I think it's D9, 90,
200.
200.
And 97, that's the tri-board for equity.
For equity?
Yes.
Okay. All right, then that brings us to board remarks. Actually, did you want to do your conference report out first, or?
Sure. I just wanted to share with the board that I did attend the Illinois Association of School Administrators Conference, which is the conference that superintendents across the state go to in Springfield on September 29th and 30th. Out of the 850 districts, my rough estimate is there had to be about 500 people there. It was a pretty large conference. So I attended a couple of sessions of note. One was on the portrait of a graduate and how they've used that tool in Glenbard District 87 to really infuse this, like, what are we trying to do here and what's our vision of young people. So that was a great session. And then I also attended sessions on superintendent evaluation and how people are making sure that it's not an annual event, but rather checking in over time and giving feedback and how that helps to inform good practice. I would say that one of the things I did mention is it is what might, to connected with a few of colleagues there to see about if there would be an interest of creating within that space affinity spaces for women superintendents, women of color superintendents, superintendents of color, because I think that would be a support system. So I've kind of initiated that conversation with a few colleagues, and we'll see about doing something like that next year. Cool. Thank you for the opportunity to attend.
Were there any board remarks?
I just wanted to comment on the DC trip because it was in our consent agenda. So Carrie and I have been working with a committee of parents. As you guys recall, we've done the DC trip. We always did it kind of in February over President's Day weekend. And this time we are going to go May 13th through 16th. That was what was approved. We formed a committee, and I just want to thank them. It's a committee of parents who also work in the hospitality space and event planning. So we have somebody that is like Pfizer event planning, like big giant events, Marriott hotel, stuff like that. And we've tried to structure the committee. I'm on it as an 8th grade parent. We've got parents of 7th graders, parents of 6th graders. I think I come up again as the parent of the 5th grader. But the goal is to kind of set this committee up so that we can have some continuity and not have to start from scratch. And Carrie's been a great liaison for the administration. But what I think is most exciting is we've identified a new vendor that's a not-for-profit, and the programming is way better than we've had before and much more aligned to our curriculum goals, with one day really focused on kind of like policies, civil rights, Social Security, healthcare, immigration, those kinds of things, and they provide teachers that run workshops with the students instead of being like a sightseeing tour. It's kind of based in learning. And then one day is on government. So you do a simulation of the Senate and you go to the White House and the Capitol. And then one day is on American history and kind of covering American involvement in certain wars and history. We are going to make sure to go to the African American History Museum and the Holocaust Memorial, and then an opportunity to see another museum and certain other historic places. But it's been a really good experience planning, and I'm excited for this 8th grade class and for it to continue.
Cool. Thanks for that, Holly.
Great, thanks.
Any other remarks? All right, then, since there's no other business, I'll ask for, we'll just do a voice vote to adjourn. So all in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
All right, that's 8:13.
All opposed.
Let's work everyone.